future. We don't know whether these new sectors are going to be sources of greater growth, are going to be what people refer as ET, energy technologies. And when we talk about energy technologies, we can think both about traditional and new types of fossil fuels. For example, shale gas or oil sands could be a source of innovation and growth. Or, of course, a lot of the energy technology are going to be in the space of green economy, renewable resources, sustainable economic growth, things having to do with clean tech and all the innovation occur right now to be able to manage global climate change, to deal with making sure that the environment remains clean. So there is not a trade-off between growth and the environment. If we're going to destroy the environment, of course, in the long run, there'll be diseases, there's going to be flooding, there'll be droughts, and eventually we're going to damage our opportunity for growth. So there's a huge amount of stuff that's occurring as innovation in technology having to do with sustainable economic growth, green economy, alternative and renewable resources. That's going to be important. Maybe a lot of the growth is going to be in what people refer as BT or biotechnology. Think about it, stem cell research, gene therapy, nanotechnologies, new applications of all these innovation in science and medical research to better healthcare. There is a huge amount of stuff that's going on. People are living longer and we'll have to make sure that they remain healthy during old age. So that's going to be a source of growth. There'll be also, of course, massive innovation in what people refer to as IT, information technologies, Web 2.0, Web 3.0, social media, cloud computing, robotics, automation, application of these new IT technologies to services like healthcare and education and publishing, integration of traditional media and online media. Of course, the internet and these changes are completely and radically changing the way we live, the way we work, the way we socialize, the way we even entertain ourselves. We're going to live in a digital future. So we don't know whether the major innovations are going to be in ET, energy technologies, or BT, biotech, or in IT, or any combination of all these things. But certainly, there is a lot of stuff is happening. It's going to radically change the way we live, the way we produce, the way we work, and so on for the long term. And that's going to be positive. In the long run, science, technology, and innovation has made us healthier, more productive, higher income, higher opportunity, higher welfare. So these are the positives about the global economy, and I think we should recognize them, even if many of these positives I'll discuss later have to do more with longer-term trends, things like technology, innovation, globalization, the rise of emerging markets. Let's now talk a little bit about the potential downside risk in the global economy, the things that we worry that are actually having to do more with the short run rather than long run. I think there are at least 5 issues that you have to think and worry about and try to figure out the solution to them. The first one is that there is still this Eurozone crisis, and we have to figure out how to resolve it. The second one is that the United States has slow economic growth, and by next year is going to face a fiscal cliff that could, under some circumstances, lead to a stall of economic growth. The third one is that the economic growth model of China is unbalanced and uncoordinated, has to be rebalanced in order to maintain high economic growth and avoid a hard landing. The fourth issue is that while the potential growth rate of emerging markets is still robust, there has been a slowdown of growth of emerging markets. We have to understand why it's happening, why from Russia to Brazil to India to Turkey, growth in the last year or two has slowed down, whether it's temporary or whether it could be a risk. And finally, of course, we're talking about peace. There are geopolitical issues in the global economy, from the Middle East to Asia and so on, that have to be addressed. There could be sources of economic, financial, and of course, political pressures. So let me try to address these questions. The first observation that is general I'll make is the following one. After the global financial crisis was over and the recession was over, the recovery of economic growth in most advanced economies from US, Europe, Japan has been more like a U, anemic, subpar, below trend, very, very slow economic growth. Traditionally, when you get into a recession, in the recovery stage, you recover fast. It's like a ball that jumps down and jumps back again, and you go back to above potential growth as you reduce the slack in the goods and labor market. This time around, it's not been a V-shaped recovery, it's been like a U. So we have to understand why and what can be done about it. Unfortunately, this recovery has been like a U, anemic, subpar, below trend, because this was not a typical recession. This was a recession caused by financial crisis, and a financial crisis caused by too much debt and leverage, first in the household sector and the private sector, like households, banks, financial institutions, even a fat tail of the corporate sector. And now, as a result of the response to the crisis, we've had a massive increase in budget deficits and public debt, so an increase in the leverage of the public sector. So we ended up now with advanced economies that have too much private debt and they have also too much public debt. And unfortunately, whenever you have a recession deriving from a balance sheet crisis, too much stocks of private and public debts and liabilities and leverage, you have a painful process of deleveraging. Deleveraging means you have to spend less in the private and public sector to save more or to dissave less in order to gradually, over time, reduce those debts and leverage. And that reduction in spending means less demand, less jobs, less production, and less economic growth. Unfortunately, that process of deleveraging often takes 5 to 10 years. The crisis started around 2007, so I would say we're unfortunately midstream in that process of deleveraging and reducing excesses of private and public debt. And therefore, in the US, in the Eurozone, in the UK, in Japan, in other advanced economies, depends. Some countries have too much private debt, some countries have too much public debt, some of them have too much of both. That process of deleveraging is still ongoing, and that's why the recovery in advanced economies has been more like a U. In emerging markets, the recovery after the global financial crisis was more like a V. Most of them avoided the recession, even those who had one had a strong return to high economic growth. It was so high last year that people were worrying about overheating and excessive growth of inflation in emerging markets. That was the story last year. Why the recovery been stronger in emerging markets? 3 reasons. One, potential growth is higher in emerging markets, as I pointed out, 6% rather than 2%. Secondly, most of these emerging markets, with a few exceptions, did not have the balance sheet problems of too much private and public debt that became the Achilles heel of advanced economies. These emerging markets had their crises in the past. Latin America in the 70s and 80s, Asia in the 1990s, but since then they've fixed their households, their corporates, their banks, their governments, all of them, with some exception, tend to have low levels of debt and leverage in the private and public sector. That's why the crisis was milder in emerging markets. And 3, they have more policy bullets in terms of monetary and fiscal tools to react to economic slowdown in advanced economies. So the paradox actually of the global economy today is the following one. 10, 15 years ago, emerging markets used to be the one that were the borrowers and the debtors, and advanced economies used to be the lenders and the savers and the creditors. Today is the opposite. Most of the emerging markets have become the savers and the creditors and the lenders, and most of the advanced economies, because of their large fiscal and external deficits, today are the borrowers and they are the debtors, to the point in which we have to worry about even the solvency of the government. So in some sense, from a fundamental point of view, many emerging markets have become more like advanced economies, and unfortunately some advanced economies today look like, in terms of fiscal, financial, debt, sustainability issues, they look like emerging markets. Look at what's happening recently in Greece or other parts of the Eurozone.